All right, so we got a new intro to the coach show. I wanted to throw that out there, and I put my picture is my pup. So if you see the old Central League garb on there, that's not current. That was Leo, and I do want to send a shout out to him. He passed the Rainbow Bridge last Monday. So it's been an inherently rough week here in Dog Pound Land. Well, let's take us right into this. This is episode 24. Coach Kammrad, I didn't even think we'd get through, I don't know, episode 1, but we made it. So we're pretty excited to get in here. But tonight, episode 24, Lewis Central head coach Justin Kammrad. And if I mispronunciate your name, I'm kind of like the Harry Carey of Southeast Iowa, if that makes any sense.
You nailed it, though. And that my name gets brutalized a lot. So, yeah, I appreciate you getting it right.
Yeah, and you can't screw up on Banks either. Can you, Doherty?
No, it's pretty easy.
Now, how many times, Doherty, has your name been screwed up?
Oh, it gets butchered all the time, man. It's just part of it.
Absolutely. Well, Justin, or Coach Kammrad, we're excited to have you on tonight. These guys are chomping at the bit to pick your brain, but won several state titles. You just seem to be kicking butt there over in Lewis Central, and I already knew that you were a great coach. I did some research. So, welcome to the show, man.
No, I appreciate you having me on. I watched it last week, and you guys do a fabulous job. So to get to this phase, I know why. You guys are doing a great job with it. So,
well, they say that 2 out of 3 ain't bad, and they can't kick me off the show because I run the sucker. So anyway, Dee, you got it, buddy.
Yeah, Coach. Just always like to start with an opener. Just kind of your background and how you got into coaching, and just kind of your route here.
Yeah, for sure. I'm originally from Iowa. I'm an Iowa native. I was born and raised in Council Bluffs, Iowa. I went to Thomas Jefferson High School, and then had the fortunate opportunity to go on, obviously, play college football, and played at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Obviously, the program's no longer there, unfortunately. Sore subject for me. I get online and I share my frustrations many times about that. Those were the 5 best years of my life. In college football, and some of the guys that I played with, and just really, absolutely loved it there. Met a lot of really good coaches. The coaching tree that was at UNO is pretty amazing. A lot of those guys are now at the Division I level. Some guys I played with, obviously, with the NFL, and, a guy that's the offensive line coach at the Cowboys was, starting lineman, when I played there too. So, had a great opportunity there. And then, after that, I played arena football for a few years, got into high school coaching at that time, went back to my alma mater, and was there for 4 years while also playing arena football. Career ended after an injury, and so got into arena coaching. So I coached arena football for a while as offensive coordinator, while double dipping at the high school level, and then took my first head coaching job rather young. I was 26. I thought I knew everything. That was far from the truth. There was a lot of trial and error. But what I will say is I surrounded myself with some really good coaches, and I got a guy on staff who was a head coach who had won a couple state titles in Nebraska, who I sort of leaned on, as a young guy and trying to figure things out. And I spent 6 years at Council Bluffs Abraham Lincoln as the head coach there, and had a couple tremendous years. We went 9-0 in 2010, and thought we had a really good team. Unfortunately, got upset by Urbandale in the first round, and things change in life, right? My wife and I had 4 kids, and she was at Lewis Central Community Schools. All my kids were attending there, and I just happened to be in the Council Bluffs schools, and had to make a career decision on what I wanted to do. And the best possible thing was going back to be an assistant. And so Jim Duggan was the head coach at Lewis Central at the time, who won a couple state titles at St. Albert, had been at Dyersville Beckman for a while, was down in Duncanville prior to coming to Lewis Central down in Texas, and so that was probably the best thing for me, is to take a back seat. I went back to the offensive coordinator role at that time, and just really learned from a state championship coach, and dug my heels in there and picked his brain for those years. And then in 2018 was his last year as a head coach. In 2019, I took over at Lewis Central, and, I've been there now for 7 years. And, we've had some great success, and had some really, really darn good football players. So, that's a little bit of the nutshell of the journey for me, and where I've been and what I've done.
I'm going to let you guys jump in. I just have the crazy questions, Coach.
You bet. Fire away.
Well, so Coach, you've built a championship program, and I'm just curious, like, what are the non-negotiables of Lewis Central football for you guys?
Yeah, for sure. First and foremost, we want our kids to be committed to the program. And that's everything that we do from off season, strength conditioning. A lot of people will say that we're too big for class 4A. Unfortunately, we're not. Like, we have tons of kids that are multi-sport athletes. And so that's the other one, is our kids got to be competing in every other sport that we have possible. We got some kids that try to specialize, which is fine, but I push our football players to be competitive in other sports. I think it's super important that they are. That allows them a little bit of break away from football and some of the stuff that we are doing. So get out there and compete. And then the weight room is huge. And we have a program that we call the commitment program, and we keep points for if you're in an off-season sport. If you're competing during that time, are you in the weight room after school? And, what's your grade? What's your GPA? And so we got points that all attach to that, just to try to keep our kids committed to that program. And we like to say, 90%, everyone wants to be 100%, right? Like, it's not going to happen. So our goal is to be 90% committed to the program and everything that we do, whether that's our leadership stuff, whether that's strength conditioning, whether that's in the classroom, is like, we got to show up. And that's half the battle. And so, that's where we start with a lot of the things that we do and try to, ingrain to our kids.
I think I missed some of the introduction. So, forgive me. I had to go up and let the dog out. He's being a nut tonight. But anyway, when you look at the burning desire to coach, right? You had talked, or I had heard a little bit about arena football and that sort of stuff. When did you really know that, man, I'm going to coach, and I'm going to coach at a freaking high level, and I'm going to bring it?
Yeah, I always knew I wanted to be around the game in some capacity. I love playing the game. Had a great career. Had an unfortunate situation happen right before pro day, and so I missed an opportunity. And I think that's where it really started with me was, I had a chance and had an opportunity to play at the highest level, or get an opportunity to play at the highest level. And unfortunately, injury took that away from me. And so I sort of shifted my focus onto, well, how else can I give back to kids that want the same thing and that kind of stuff. And so at that point, I thought my career was over. And then I sort of, I healed up and got back and was able to play arena football for a few years. But it was sort of during that time of reflection, from an injury, going like, what's next? Like, this has been my life. I started playing when I was 9 years old, and just absolutely loved the game of football and everything that came with it, and the teammates and the coaches that I was around. And just, I knew that was something that I wanted to do. I didn't know it was coaching at the time. I just knew it was like, I can't leave this game. It's important to me. And it's unfortunately, you don't want it to be your identity, but it has become that. And so I think it was just, I think the ultra competitiveness of myself as a player, and then realizing, the way that I can give back and push kids and motivate kids to be their best, and finding out where they are, and helping kids achieve success and get to the next level and get school paid for. And it was just, that's where my desire is to help our kids become not only good football players, but really good human beings. And then, if we can get school paid for, through the game of football, I think that's huge. I think that's an opportunity. And, I think it's a motivator for some of our kids, because we've been able to do that. And, success obviously, brings on a lot more to it. And so you become even more competitive, and you want to be good. And so you push yourselves, and so I think that's probably where it really started, where, it was through a devastating moment for me, and a personal, situation that, like, hey, I gotta change this into something else.
Well, I think that's badass, man. And I'm a fan already, just listening to that brief little bit. Now, to kind of change gears, what kind of genre of music do you listen to before game?
Man, I'm getting older, and it's funny. People are like, you're not old. I'm like, I feel old every day, but it's country, and I don't like. It's a little bit of everything. It's probably the 2000s and the up to date country music that doesn't really. You kids don't like it. They get mad at me because that's what's in the weight room some days. I'm like, it's Country Wednesday. I can lift to this all day long. Like, I can go to that dark place and just be like, hey, we're gonna lift. We're gonna get after it. And so for me, it's really country. But there's sometimes that those old tunes from the '90s will come back in. And my kid's right in the car with me. So I got a 7th grader right now, and he looks at me like, what is this? And I'm like, this is music back in the day. Like, this is stuff. Like, And so. Yeah, it's country. It's sort of mellow, right? Like back in the day, it was like we're just going full bore, 100 miles an hour. Now it's like, all right, let's gather the thoughts, let's collect the thoughts, let's get into it, and then we'll get out there. So
I didn't take you for a Sawyer Brown type person, but anyway, Dee, you got the next question.
yeah,
I want to circle back to what you were talking about with the multiple sport athletes, and we're mid-sized 3A. We think that it's really, really important, just not only because of all the things that you learn by being a multiple sport athlete, but we've got to share athletes. And I think at the 4A level, it's awesome to hear that you're pushing that. And the proof with your son, he was a state runner-up and a state champ in football. He was a state runner-up in wrestling, and then he was on the 4x2 team that won the state medal at track. How important is it for these kids to be multiple sport athletes, in your opinion?
I think it's the second most important thing besides, like being in the weight room. Yeah, that's fine, but you need to go compete, like in different sports. It's a different attitude. You need to find out that maybe you're not so good at something, and how do you handle that? What's the adversity from that? And you brought up my son, like obviously a really good quarterback. He wasn't the fastest guy on that 4x2 team, but he worked his tail off to try to be as fast as the other three guys that were really fast. And sort of for wrestling too. It's funny, like we laugh about, like he was a state runner-up in the state championship game, state champion match, and it comes down to the ultimate tiebreaker. He loses it, but he wasn't a year-round wrestler. He didn't freestyle. He didn't Greco. He got into it when he was really young. He had some really, really tough wrestling partners he grew up around that were multiple state champions from Gable Porter, and then Wyatt Reese at Logan Magnolia, and he would just get pounded. Like he was really good defensive wrestler, but it taught him a lot, the resilience, the grit, the toughness, like the don't quit. And so, I'm a big proponent of that to our own kids, to our athletes on, you need to step out of your comfort zone. This is where you grow. And I think that's where a lot of kids miss the boat, is they love being content and comfortable and being in their happy place, where like they don't stretch themselves enough. They don't get uncomfortable. And athletes have to do that, because the football field is going to be the same way. As there's going to be things that happen on Friday night that maybe you're not prepared for, but how are you going to handle it? It's going to be through those other sports that you've been in, different teammates, maybe it's not your friends that you're competing with. And so there's just so many added things around it that, we preach to our kids and we want them to be a part of. I was a multi-sport athlete. And I tell our kids to this day, like, we want you to run track. And I hated track. Like our coach was, in my opinion, on the west side of the state, was one of the best ones, but we all ran 400s. And it was like, no, like we don't want to run that. But it taught you a lot, like you had to learn how to, with that last 100, like it's dark. Like it's get hurt when you get done. And so I just think there was a lot to it. And, I felt that my upbringing and going through those things, like kids need to challenge themselves.
What does your practice look like? I mean, do you see? I'm kind of old school. So when I was a head coach, it was 2.5, 3 hours, and then I came to Doherty and I thought, holy crap, this is awesome, because he can get it whipped out in about an hour and 45 minutes. What does Lewis Central do?
We're old school. But we taper them, I guess. We'll be 2.5 hours to start the season, to be honest with you. There's just so much that we have to get covered, so much you have to get done. And for us, I can't remember 3. I think you guys are the same. Like we got 4 non-district games. We want to win those. Those are super important because we know the RPI in the state is huge. That's how you get into the playoffs. But our ultimate goal is, like, we have to get better. Like we have to get through some stuff. We have to grind through that. Once we hit district, which is usually week 6, we start cutting her back, and we slowly get to 2 hours. And then we slowly get down to 1 hour 45. And then in the postseason, we're below 1 hour 30. And so we find ways to cut out as much as we can. Just like having multi-sport athletes, we are playing kids on both sides of the ball. We don't platoon. We don't have that type of numbers. We'll have 9 through 12, we'll have 115 kids, which is a lot. But I also don't want to ever sit in a situation where I got one of our best players standing next to me and we lose a game because he's right next to me. And so we have to cross-train our kids. They got to play both sides of the ball, whether they're a starter on both sides, that's different. But we have to find ways to get them reps and get them prepared and get them to understand what's going on. And so I think there's value in that, you know, and I talk to my coaches all the time is like, how can we take the miles off some of our kids? So some of our high mile kids aren't taking all their reps. Our receivers, if it's in the 7-on-7 and they're running go balls all the time, we're going to find a way to get the number 2 guy. Like, hey, we'll take reps off guys. We don't have GPS systems, but we have the old analytic. We'll use our eyes and realize this kid's running a lot to try to get some of those guys off the field. And so we try to play it by ear, but first 4 weeks of the season, it's 2.5 hours, you know, for us.
Perfect.
When it comes to the culture and leadership in your program, how are you developing leadership within your locker room instead of just hoping leaders emerge naturally?
I'll tell you what, this is the biggest challenge that we have. And I think, you know, I can just speak for Lewis Central. I think that's across the board with everything, because leadership is extremely hard. It's extremely difficult. The years that we've been really, really good, we've had leaders, you know, and we've done some leadership stuff. But I'll tell you, this is like the first year that I created a curriculum. We just, you know, and I think it's a product of how things go. You know, we lost 5 games last year by a total of 15 points. You know, it's like, and we were young. We had some young kids and they were injured, and those kids didn't have any leadership ability. And so we've taken now to the leadership council. Now we got some sophomores, we have some juniors, all seniors are invited to it. And so, you know, we have a curriculum that we give to our kids. I got a 2-hour block at the end of the day where I got all of our athletes, which is nice. And so we're able to spend time with our kids and develop some of those culture and those attitudes. And they have to fill out, they got to have daily steps throughout the week and that they have to go through. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's on them to take it serious. And I think we do. We reflect on some of those things. But I just said I can't let it, you know, we can't let leadership happen by chance anymore. We have to work on it. You know, it's tough that nowadays, like, kids to hold each other accountable. That's tough, you know, especially if it's my friend. And so we're really working on that. You know, we'll continue in the summer when we can get back to them and we can have access to them. You know, and so it's a work in progress, and it's ever changing. I think every year is a little bit different with the kids that you have and kids willing to be leaders. You know, unfortunately, I think, you know, we select captains and sometimes it becomes a popularity vote, and we don't want that. We want kids that are true, authentic leaders that care about the program and the standards and the expectations that we have for everybody.
It's phenomenal.
I'm going to let you dig in, Dee. I'm spamming people.
So want to go back. We had a whole section here, practice and program efficiency, and major question, big problem for us. How do you balance physicality with keeping kids healthy throughout the season? I mean, you got to let them rip because they've got to do it right on Friday nights. But sometimes you're a little bit thin. How do you balance that?
Yeah, and this is another area that we're always evolving. One year it's this, one year it's not. I'm a firm believer, and we say it to our kids, is you have to be physical, and you have to be willing to stick your nose into someone else and do that. And it's just something that has to be trained for some others, and some just they're going to get after it. And I think it's controlling that. Obviously, a lot of our sessions are thud. You know, some of our individual tackling periods are live because you have to do it. You know, because of the first time that you go live on someone can't be in a game. And so we have to get live tackling reps in there. I think it's super important that guys are getting those opportunities, those reps in it. I'll probably say that our linemen are probably full contact, full go the whole duration that we're involved. It's worked out that way for us. Obviously you get some dings in there and all that kind of stuff, but our linemen are always full go. You know, obviously we try to protect our running backs and our quarterbacks and, you know, our linebackers that want to get crazy with it. We got to protect those guys as much as we can, but I can't let those guys go out there and not be allowed to go full with that. So that's a big thing within our coaching staff is like, okay, are we going thud right now? Are we going live? And so we early on in the season, once again, like everyone else, we start to taper everything down. But early on, like we have to go live. Like we have to get after it. We have to be physical. And whether that's a 10 minute period, that we're going full live or a certain amount of plays, we have to get that in there. And so we try to do that. We don't tackle in the postseason. That's all to the wrap. Like postseason is obviously super important. And like I said, we taper it again, like around week 6. That's one of the things that we sort of start cutting out is how much tackling we're doing. And so, but the game, that's how the game's won. You got to block people and you got to tackle people. And if you're not working on it, it makes it really difficult.
Amen.
We had a question there from Diego. What is the most important significant factor in getting high school kids ready for the next level of play? Discipline in doing their job on the field, and then getting bigger, faster, stronger, and then character development. So it's kind of a multi-faceted question. Thanks, Diego.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I always question coaches when they come in and recruit, and I want our kids to hear because I want the same message because that I'm giving them to be told by the coaches that are recruiting them. The film gets you seen, right? But it's your character that probably gets you into the door with colleges. And so it's working on that. But, when it comes down to it, you have to get stronger. You have to get faster, right? And so that improves your performance, which means the film's going to show up, for guys getting to the next level. The game at the next level is faster. It is more physical. And so if you're not preparing yourself the first time you step on a college campus, you're not going to be ready. And I think, I tell our kids all the time, and I'll tell parents is, I know a lot of our kids aren't going to play college football, but my goal is to make sure that you're prepared, that if you do and you have that opportunity, that you are prepared when you step on the college campuses. And I sort of, I don't boast about it, but it's been nice that several of our kids that have been to Power 4 schools, they're not in the freshman lifting programs. They're moving right into with the older guys because they are doing a lot of that stuff and getting prepared prior to college, and so that they are prepared for that. But I think, it's hard because everyone matures at a different phase. And so to say, hey, you got to get bigger, faster, well, that's going to take time, but you got to work on it. You got to make sure that you're doing those types of things. And obviously character's huge. They're looking at everything, especially at the Power 4. They're looking at your Instagram. They're looking at your Facebook. They're looking at what you're tweeting and subtweeting and whatever else that may be. And that's huge for them. Now with NIL, they're investing a lot of money in these individuals that they get the wrong guy in there. It's going to hurt their culture and their program. And so I think it's multifaceted. The one thing that wasn't on there is academics. Like you have to be good academically. Like you got to get in school, like 2.3, and NCAA, you got to be there. You got to take your academics seriously. Unfortunately, we've had some kids that have had some opportunities and unfortunately the GPA wasn't there. And so the alternate route of junior colleges is a great thing. And it's not worked out for them. But, you have to make sure that when you step on campus as a freshman in high school, like your GPA starts, you can't mess around the first year. Otherwise you're chasing yourself, throughout high school.
Excellent.
Go ahead, Coach Fry.
Yeah, I was just going to say I agree wholeheartedly with that last point, the education piece. And I think, we as high school coaches can do such a good job of kind of implementing that mentality as a freshman in high school, even because it's the same if you kind of, crap the bed your freshman year in terms of your academics, it's hard to get that back up to where you're, college ready when you're a senior, just because that GPA stays low when it starts low. So, yeah. But
and really for it too is it's your junior year because you got to have 16, core classes done by your senior year. Yep. So really you only have 2 years to make up for it,
Yeah. But no, I was just going to say, as a fellow offensive guy, your offense is known for, its adaptability and how efficient it is. How would you describe your offensive philosophy and how it operates at Lewis Central?
For sure. The first thing is we're going to attack the field both horizontally and vertically as much as we can. And we're going to try to maximize our players as much as we can. The old adage is, it's players over plays. And so how can we get those guys the ball in space as much as we can? And so, but we also want to have a physical run game. We pride ourselves on that and firmly believe in that. We know in the state of Iowa, it gets cold in late October and November. And if you can't run the football and all you're doing is throwing the ball, like it's going to be tough. And so we try to be as multidimensional as possible. We're looking for areas of leverage and numbers. We're a big formation team. We got a lot of different unbalanced looks and movements. We probably motion. I would say motion or move. Right. We play with an H-back and 11 personnel a lot. Probably 75 to 80% of the time, we're always moving. We're not typically in a static front. Much like a defense, like those guys are moving all the time. Like we're trying to move, and we're trying to get you set, and we're trying to take advantage of where the numbers are at and where the leverage is at, and then ultimately, obviously, the players. And so we try to be as multidimensional as we can, within our schemes and our play calling, and we got to adapt that every single year to the type of players that we have.
How has your offense kind of changed over time?
Yeah. So, for me personally, when I played, I was a running back at Nebraska Omaha, and it was all inside zone. Actually, we ran option period for 30 minutes every day, which gets old, right? It was midline option, and it was speed option, and then it was inside zone. And so I've always loved inside zone, run game. And so, so we obviously got to change that and adapt that to our players, and that kind of stuff. And so, just being able to adapt everything to the players, within our schemes and whatnot. Our offensive coordinator, I let those guys, I got a great offensive coordinator, Dan Hoke, who played at Harlan, who played at the University of Missouri, as our offensive coordinator. And, I allow him to do a lot of it. I think that's the biggest thing as a head coach. You got to be able to allow your coaches to coach. I have some input on it. Like mine's all in the passing game. And obviously I love the run game, but he's a big power guy. So him and I get after, like, I know we want to down block and pull around and kick out and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I want inside zone. So there's always some good conversations with him, but you got to let your guys coach. And I think that's the thing is, I started off in the I formation back when I was at Abraham Lincoln, and I had a running back by the name of Austin Ebertowski who ran for 2,000 yards that year, and ended up going to Northern Iowa and playing there for a couple years before going to Morningside. And so I got to Lewis Central as the offensive coordinator at that time, and Jim Duggan was the head coach, and we were still under center. We had a quarterback, Austin Simmons, who was a first-team All-Stater, who ended up being a 2-year starter at South Dakota. And so we were 50-50, probably under center and in the shotgun. And when I took over with Max Duggan, when Jim, he sort of gave me those reins, was like, okay, we got to get him. He's a dual threat. You guys saw what he could do in the shotgun. It's like, hey, we got to be able to allow him to be in the run game, the +1 in the run game with him, and his elite track speed and his ability to throw the ball was okay. We transitioned ourselves offensively from being under center. A little bit. We still did as a freshman with him, and then slowly, gradually, it was full 100% in the gun. And so it's funny because last year we got back under center a couple of times, and the going thing this offseason was we're going to be back under center a little bit more. It's physical, direct, right out you ground game, right? Like we're going to pound the ball. So I guess football is always, always evolving, but it's always coming back to some of the old stuff. And, we had some success with it. So we got some, our players allow us to be able to do it. And so it's just one of those things that, we're always trying to adapt with what we have and how our kids and our skill sets work. So
Diego's got a monster paragraph. So I'm going to make Ben read it.
All right. First off, thanks, Coach. I found out playing in college that staying true to your job and actually soaking in the play discipline gets you a long way, and that college harps on that job responsibility more than anything, along with just showing up and putting the work in. And then follow up, does holding kids accountable, learned it from Doherty, play a factor in how kids perform on or off the field?
Yeah, I think discipline is everything. And accountability is everything, because if the kid's not disciplined in life or in the classroom or outside of school, probably not going to be disciplined on the field. It's hard to change a person. Like, you are who you are. Like, now if there's glimmers of hope and a kid can sort of do some things and, and adapt and be coachable, I think the other thing is it allows us to be able to work with them. But if someone's not willing to do those things and not willing to take the coaching, I think it's tough. I think we have a saying, within our program is you have to have leaders and then you have to have followers, and so the followers, have to be willing to be led within that program. And that's the accountability piece is, someone's going to get on you, and it's never personal. And it's always about, holding our standards and expectations of what we're trying to do. And so, it all goes together. Like, you have to be disciplined, because that those 10 other guys are relying on you, to do your job and your responsibility. And it goes into the weight room too. Like, if I know you're a dog in the weight room and you're taking reps off, and you're like, what's going to happen on Friday night? Like, what are you going to do? You just don't turn it on. Like, so I think that's one of the things that we're always preaching with our kids too, and that they understand is that you can't be one way on the field and a different way outside. And so it's tough, especially, with kids. You get them for 8 hours a day, and they're on their own with their parents the rest of the time.
We're about 50% in. So now you get a great question from Coach Banks. So what's your go-to pregame meal?
Oh, I don't know if I should say it, but it's
Panda. Say it.
Panda Express. Orange chicken with a crab ragoon.
I think that's more of a like a flex bone type of coach that likes that.
Yeah, give his flex bone in.
I'm just messing with you, man. No, I'm going to let Dee get the next one here.
Yeah, Coach, just kind of transition here to the off season. You've talked a lot about the weight room. Can feel that you know that it's important. What are some of the other things that you do in the off season at a championship program that needs to be done for all programs?
Yeah. I think the one thing that we try to do first is we always try to have one type of volunteering opportunity for our kids. I think it's important. We do some stuff during the spring. We help out with the local, organization that does stuff for clothing and, their pantries and that kind of stuff. So we do that. And then in the summer, we try to find one of those things just for team bonding stuff. But the other thing that we really get heavy into is 7-on-7. Not that we're going to throw the ball 50, 60 times a game, but you have to work on it. It's an opportunity for us to see some of our kids that we're maybe unsure of. And so we spend a lot of time with that. And we're right here next to Omaha. And so we compete every Wednesday with the Omaha schools on a weekly basis. We have games every week, which is nice. Through the month of June, we're able to get with them and sort of see where we're at. There's some really good teams over there. So we spend a lot of time with that. And so, the other things, obviously, we spend a lot of time. I'll be honest with you. We spend a lot of time at the school, and it's hard, for kids. But I think they understand it. We usually don't have any problems. Like, we're at school for 3 hours, and it's wild. Like, we spend about an hour on skill development with our kids to start the day, and our older guys will go. They'll go get their speed work, and that's with our track coach, and he does an unbelievable job. And so they'll get speed work in, and then after that, they'll come to the weight room. And our freshmen are completely separate, so we flip flop with our freshmen during that time. And so they're not running for a complete hour. He's big time rest guy, right? Like, feed the cats. Like, I sent half of our coaching staff one year to go listen to Tony and like how can we make sure that our guys are getting faster. And so the rest time they're probably out there walking and talking more than they're actually sprinting, right? But they're getting stuff done. They're getting their plyos done. And so it is an hour time. It just works out that way to make sure that those that are in the weight room are getting their stuff done. And so we just spend a lot of time together. Last year we implemented, I just thought we needed to be a little bit tougher. So we went down, it was before the beach would open at the lake here, Lake Manawa. And they graciously opened it up for us. And we just called it Toughness Wednesday. And we got in the sand, and we had implements. I brought in a former Marine, and one of my assistant coaches is a deputy sheriff, and so he brings in the implements, and we're out there in the sand. The kids absolutely loved it, and it's like, and they're asking, can we start that at the beginning of the summer? And so, but you start doing things that are a little bit different, a little bit harder, and you're counting on guys, and you're doing things together. It's building that bond and that trust with one another. And so, we do a lot of that stuff. By 10 o'clock, they're out of there and they're on their own. They're out working, they're out playing other sports and whatever else that may be. And, we try to get everything done within that time frame. We'll do some stuff on some Sunday night installs. We'll do it twice. We'll do some Sunday installs, and then we compete in 2 7-on-7 tournaments. We've always done one, the Nebraska Preps one. we've always done. And then obviously Iowa Westerns haven't won this year. And I'm like, hey, it's a perfect opportunity for us to support them. We share the same facilities. They play at our field, and just go out there and compete a little bit. And so we did that. And then this year will be the first one. Maybe I need to pick some people's brains, but this first year we're going to a team camp. We're going to go down to Northwest Missouri State right before Dead Week. Once again, just a little bit of bonding experience for one day and see how it goes. So, but that's probably our summer in a nutshell on what we do and how our guys are with us most of the summer.
Well, I can see, you're also trying to make it fun because it is the best part of their day, right? To be on the football field, right?
Right. Absolutely.
All right, Ben.
Yeah. Talking through the off season and summer and somebody who's also, doing all that stuff, how do you keep kids bought into all that off season work when they're at the school so much and when they're waking up and doing all that? What is, I know you made it fun, but like, are there other things that you guys do inside that off season work that just kind of keeps them coming back?
I think it's just the drive. I think it's just been built into our culture, that this is what we do. This is how we are. That I want to be there. I want to be there for my teammate. I want to make sure that I'm accountable to them and that I'm not going to let them down. And, I think that's the added aspect of it. When we talk about our 90% program, and, it's funny because parents are like, hey, like, we're going on this vacation and my son doesn't want to go. Like, can you tell him to go on vacation? And I will. Like family time's huge. I got 4 kids and I got a wife too. And, and doing those things, being around them is that kind of stuff. I'll say our families have been really good too. They use that dead week, and if they need to go on vacation, they'll schedule it at the end of the week because we go Monday through Thursday. It's always a 3-day week, 3-day weekend for our kids, and so our parents have been really good with it, which has been nice. It's typically no issues, and our kids just want to be there. I think and I think that's a good thing, that they understand what the expectation is. They've seen the classes that have come before them and what they've been able to do and what they've been able to accomplish. And they just understand that, like, here's just we went back to the non-negotiables. This is what they did. And not that that's going to be the same result, but if we don't, then there might be some reason why we didn't achieve the success that we wanted to. And so, we do those things, and obviously we want to make it as fun as possible. And our kids just love football too. I think that's another added aspect of it.
All right. So, Diego's got a fun question. And this is for all of us. Tonight. Yeah. It's awesome as much, and if you do have a question, be sure to throw it out there. But what other sport best ties to a great football player? Do you want Yes, to play everything, to compete all the time. So I say it depends on, if you're a defender or anything on the football field, you want to talk about them, right? King Leonidas, the wrestlers, right? It's the wrestlers. Right. You want your big 7 foot tall receivers to be basketball players, right?
You're hitting it right on the head. I preach to our linemen, like, you need to be in the wrestling room now. They look at me like I'm crazy and that kind of stuff. But wrestling is huge. That is you. That is leverage. That is foot movement. That's, you against another person, which you're going to do the entire football game. Like, learning how to be physical and moving another person. And, wrestling for our big guys is huge. And like you said, like, basketball for our skill guys, go compete, go be good out there. And, obviously, like, I'm a big track guy. I'm not going to lie there, but we've had some really good football players that are soccer guys. I'll take those guys too. You got to play sports. And then obviously we've had some guys that have been baseball guys that can do that and swing the bat. So, I think it sort of ties to their position and their abilities and who they are and all that kind of stuff. But I'll be honest with you, like, if I get all of them to wrestle, I bought them all to wrestle, like Logan Jones played basketball for us. Like, that dude would have been a really good wrestler, but he was a really good basketball player. Like, so I couldn't force that one.
Oh, absolutely. I do got to throw out our one and only sponsor at this point. It's Riverside Resale Shop. You're going to want to check that out. Downtown Fort Madison. Check that out today. And if you want to sponsor us, hit us up because we're growing. We're growing like crazy, and I think it's because of Ben. Ben's the best looking. All right, Didi.
Yeah, Coach, just a chance here to give some of your assistant coaches some love, but also talk about what do you look for when you're building your staff, and also what are some things that your staff does that makes their impact huge. Obviously, coaching football and knowing their position, but some of those other details of being just an elite assistant coach.
Yeah, for sure. I have 15 assistant coaches, and I'm spoiled. And like you said, I'd be remiss if I can't name them all by name, but those guys are absolutely amazing. They give grace.
They're all, hey, you.
Yeah, they all give graciously to our program. They're bought in. They understand what our expectations are, and they're always there working. The one thing that I probably don't do a lot of, like, I don't like demand them to be there in the summer. Like, it's almost like, hey, I got this. Like I obviously asked. Oh, we got a storm.
Okay.
I asked them to come in on their days that we got certain stuff, and they'll be in there. Summertime for those guys is just as important as it is for the kids. But looking at them and everything that they have going on, I think building a staff is huge. You got to surround yourself with unbelievable human beings first. Obviously the coaching aspect is good. It's one of those things that you got to be able to coach it. You got to be able to understand it, and that kind of stuff. But it's also the relationship building part. Can they build a relationship with the kid? Can they reach every kid? How do they interact with them? What's their demeanor with that? And so, I think the first thing is that I look for is like, will they fit with the other staff members? Because sometimes, guys have their ways and it just doesn't fit. It's interesting because when I took over as the head coach, obviously I was an assistant with some of those guys. And some of those guys had been at Lewis Central for 24 years, 25 years. And so you have some veteran coaches who have been there, and throughout that time that I was an assistant, had brought over some guys that I had coached with, some guys that I had grew up with and played college football with and brought guys in. Our staff turnover hasn't been a lot. We've had a little bit in the last couple of years, but it's always going back to those connections and relationships that I had with guys that I've brought on the staff. This year's the first time that we've had some guys reach out, some former college players and guys that just want to get involved in a volunteer that we've sort of added into it, and meeting with those guys, like what value do they add? And I think the other thing is like, what if it's a young guy, what is the value we can provide to them? Like how can we help them become better coaches and help them learn the game? And, we don't always see eye to eye, I'll be 100%. We don't always see eye to eye. And I tell our coaches, I don't want yes men. I don't want you to tell me what I want to hear. Like that doesn't make us any better. That doesn't stretch us. That doesn't grow us. And we got to be able to have, some common ground on what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. And, the overarching philosophy that I have of our program and what I want from our offense and defense, and then allow those guys to sort of coach their positions, and I try not to. Last year was probably the first time I probably got too involved with our defense, and need to let those guys do the job. They're hired to do the job because I believed in them and I trusted them, to do those jobs. And so I think there's a fine line of doing that. And if you don't have trust in them, then why did you hire them, and why are they on your staff if you're going to do that? And so sort of reflection part for me. And, but the other thing too, is like, we all get along. Like it's great to be around each other. It's like your brother, right? Or your sister. Like when you get around you guys, you get back to season. It's like, all right, like we missed each other. Like we're back to being together. And so I think that's the other aspect of it, is like, we all want the same goal, common philosophy, and we're all working towards that. And, I want our guys to obviously be, continue lifelong learners and elevate our game and get better and come back and challenge our kids and challenge themselves. And so I think there's a lot to it when you're trying to fill in the right pieces and who fits in there. But I think maybe some of those things are what I sort of hold true to when looking for assistants and looking to hire guys, or maybe to promote guys within our program to different roles or positions.
Do you work extremely hard to get, like coaches that are teachers? Or do you have a mix?
That's number one. Like I wish that we could have that all. I don't have enough pull within the admin to make that happen. But when you got male figures for some of our kids in the building, that if they're at a bad day, they can go to them. or they know that they're there. I think that's huge. And unfortunately, I think in education, we start getting to the point of we just hire the next person, and maybe he's not the best teacher, right? But guess what? As an unbelievable person and human being and builds relationships, that I'm going to get that kid to work a little bit harder because he's going to believe in me and trust in me. And so, I wish all of our coaches are in the building. That's not the case for me. I would say we're probably almost 50-50 now with our staff. Now, I say that to some of our guys are at the middle school. Some of our guys are at the elementary school. So they are teachers. We got some that obviously, like I said earlier, we have a deputy sheriff who's on staff, and our defensive coordinator is not in the building. So we joke around that he's with the CIA because no one really knows what he does. So he's not in the building. And then I got, a coach this year that's coming from a different school. Actually, I have 2 defensive coaches that come from a different school. And so we got some guys that are out of the building and that kind of stuff. But I really wish that we could have everybody in the building. In that same token, for the most part, I've tried to have every head coach of a male sport on the coaching staff somehow, football wise. We've had that throughout the last several years, which is nice. We don't have any problems, sharing athletes, and they know I'm going to promote their program to my kids. And as long as they keep promoting football to them, and it just helps, all around. And I started coaching baseball for the first time in like 14 years last summer. And, and that's been interesting. But just being
how's your shoulder?
I told my son's I got a son that's a freshman, and so he's on the JV team with me. And I told him the other day, I'm like, my arms hurt. He's like, how can your arm hurt? He's through BP for 12 kids. I go, I'm old, man. Like,
I'm going to dig into the next one here. How do you coach players to handle pressure in massive games and in massive moments?
Yeah, we've had several of those. It's just putting them in those tough situations, demanding, that they're playing through the whistle, that you're playing, that you're finishing every play in practice, I think all coaches say is like, you want practice to be harder than the game so that you are prepared for the game. And so trying to put our guys in those positions that it happens before it actually happens to them, actually in a live situation. You want to make sure that you try to cover as much of that as possible and that they're prepared for that. I think it comes down to them with execution and believing in what's going on and doing those things at practice, to understand that this is what it's going to be like in the fourth quarter. And it comes down to conditioning too, a little bit. We're still a little bit old school with that. Obviously I talked earlier about feed the cat stuff. We got some conditioning stuff that, was sort of old school. When I got there to Lewis Central, I walked on the field the first day and I was like, these kids are going to die. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, but we were the smallest team in 4A when there wasn't a 5A. And we beat Johnston and we beat Valley, and we beat Ankeny, and we should not have won those games. But our kids were just mentally tough individuals. And I think that's where we try to, through conditioning, right? Like we're not trying to kill them, but like, you got to work through these things. Like life is tough and hard. And then obviously through the other competition of other games, like that's how, like football, like go compete in other sports. Like this is where you're going to build some of that kind of stuff. And so I think it's a multi-layer of things that help kids in those situations.
That was a phenomenal answer. All right, Ben or Dee.
I'll just follow up with that. So you are in a program, you took over for a coach that had won state titles. How do you handle the pressure as a leader of a powerhouse? Yeah,
it's tough. I go back to what a lot of people say a lot of times, but it's so true. It's like the climb to the top is the easy part. It's staying at the top is the hard part. And I think that's where I've unfortunately allowed myself to believe that there's external pressure being put on there because we want to stay there. We want to be there. We have felt what it feels like to be successful and to win a championship. And that feeling is like nothing else. And you want to be there so bad that you start putting pressure on yourself. And my wife will tell me to this day and would tell you, I don't decompress very well. Like I hold a lot of it on myself, and I delegate a lot, obviously, to the assistant coaches. But I feel that, there's always that opportunity that there's the bullseye on your back. And so like, what are we doing to get better? How are we progressing our program? Like what is our program doing that other programs maybe are not? What are our kids doing that maybe other programs are not? Now there's things that everyone's doing and just comes down to Jimmy's and Joe's. It does. But like, how do we keep evolving within our program? And that's just not, within our schemes, but that's within how we are coaching and how we're reaching kids and what are we doing and that kind of stuff. And so I think there's just, it's tough. Like I try to take all of it off our kids' shoulders and not, we don't talk about championships. We don't, we have one goal, and that's our two goals. We have, win our non-district and then be district champs. That's our two goals. Like, we don't talk about state championships until, you get to that point and say, hey, we got here and now let's go win one. And so I try not putting pressure on the kids. It should be process oriented. It's not, look down the road and this is where we're going to get to. It's like, hey, this is what we have to attack right now and that kind of stuff. But I think stress is inevitable as a head coach, and something I probably need to continue to work on myself is like, how can I decompress for a little bit?
You worked marvelously into my next segment because I ask this all the time. What do you do to help with your mental health, throughout the season or off season? What are you currently doing that's working?
Yeah. It's funny. It's probably crazy. And I don't know much people. Like I'm a huge believer in like our youth program, and I've been super involved with it. My wife's, the vice president, and I sit in on it and I help with finding all the coaches and that kind of stuff. So my oldest son, Braylon, who's now in college, obviously playing, I started coaching him when I was an assistant for Coach Duggan. I coached him when we transferred him over, or when I came over and he was in third grade. So I started coaching that, and I coached him all the way through eighth grade. My two middle kids, I didn't coach him. One of them didn't want me to coach him. The other one, like we've been very fortunate. I'll be honest with you. I think that's probably one of the things that's helped us is we've had a varsity staff member coach each one of our youth program grades every single year. So we've had a varsity staff member that their kid's been on those teams. So in our grades are, single grades. So it's third, fourth, fifth, sixth, they're all by themselves. So I coach now. My son will be an eighth grader next year. I've coached him the last 5 years, in youth football. And I'll be honest with you that's a de-stressor. Now my wife will say, no, it's crazy. Like you're nuts, but like, it's relaxing. Like there's not a whole lot of pressure with coaching youth football. I mean, it just keeps me in my element. It keeps me around the game. I get to go coach my youngest son. I get to be around all of our future players and develop them and coach them. And so during the season, that's like my outlet. Like if I went home, I would probably go crazy. So I walk from our practice field straight to the youth fields and I go coach youth football. And I'm there till 8:30 at night. And so that allows me to get away from the game. And I think that's where I allow our assistant coaches to do a lot of the stuff. And so I feel like I'm an assistant coach again sometimes where I could just go call a few plays, walk off the field, not worry about a thing. I got to walk over there and sort of decompress during that time. Off season, obviously there's a lot going on with, hey, what do we need to change? What do we need to work on? Go through that. And then springtime, I become like the Uber dad. Like I'm driving my kids around to their activities. And so that's where my downtime is sort of during the springtime window with select baseball. And my youngest son's a quarterback. He'll be an eighth grader and he plays, select 7-on-7. So we travel all over the place, and we've been to Phoenix, we've been to Kansas City, we've been to Oklahoma. Like we travel, and I get to spend time with him and he gets to play football. And so that's sort of something else that I do. And then obviously baseball sort of takes some of my time, during the summer. So, the mental health part of it is huge. Until you have a player or a kid in my situation that has sort of went through the ups and downs and the valleys of the mental part of the game of football and being around it, like you really don't have a perspective on it. And I have a newfound respect on it. Like it's real. Like the stresses of kids, the stresses of coaches is real. And, you got to take time for yourself. And you got to find ways to decompress and get away. And I think Coach Heitland maybe said it last week. Like the best thing that ever happened to high school coaches was dead week. It forces us to not have. We can't be around the kids. We can't have lifting. We can't do anything football. They can't be on campus. Like that's huge. And I think that's been one of the added aspects of it. And I get to see my wife for a full week before football starts. So there's a lot to it. Mental health is huge anymore.
Do you fish or golf?
Unfortunately, I have zero hobbies, right?
Okay.
So
Football's your hobby.
I say that all the time. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do when I'm retire. Like when I was younger, like my dad, we'd go fishing and we'd go catch
podcast with me
all night. Like it was like I golf. I'm terrible, but he'll have a few beverages. I get better, but I can't do that too much. It's expensive. So I don't have any hobbies, and that's part of the other thing is I sort of have to figure those things out. Like I'll pop on Huddle like 4 times a day. Like, all right, let's go through these scripted plays from last year. Let's look at like, what are we doing on? And so, my downtime is my kids' activities. That's where I'm away from most of it. And that's my hobbies for right now. And shoot, I don't know. Like I don't do anything. Like it's football. And if it's not football, it's some other sports related. So yeah, it's tough.
I'm going to let Ben or Dee kind of step in here because we only got 6 minutes left. It's fastest hour in definitely our fastest of the week, right?
Yeah. No, I think it's, time that we just fire off some rapid fire questions and see if we can't get some, quick answers. But as an offensive guy, what's your favorite offensive concept and why?
I'll go back to like I love inside zone. I just think there's so much variable in it. There's so many things you can do off it. Like we tag everything, right? And so inside zone isn't just inside zone. There's other things that we have off it, but I just love the scheme. Like we're not trying to overtake guys. We're getting vertical push. We're getting vertical movement. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get movement. I was a running back, so I love the run game, but I also understand the passing game. And so, run game concept, I'd go there. Like passing game concept, I'm a huge air raid guy. So we mix everything we have with all air raid concepts. And Y cross is my favorite. Like I just love it, from teaching it, but also like, once again, like Y cross isn't just Y cross. Like we have 8 different tags off of it, whether that's the X, the Y, the Z, whatever they have on the front side and on the back side, but Y cross is Y cross. And so those two concepts, if you turn on our film, like you're going to see that. Last couple of years with Hoke as the OC, like you're going to see a lot of power, like we're running power. But for me personally, that's where that's why I love living in.
Neck roll or no neck roll?
You better be a bad mamma jamma if you got a neck roll on. Like you go out there with a neck roll and you're done. That's a problem. Like I'm all for it if you're gonna absolutely just rock people.
All right, Dee, you got the next fast one.
All right. What's the best piece of coaching advice you've ever received?
Oh wow. That's tough. I've been around some really good coaches, and I've leaned on a lot of really good guys, but, it's funny because it's so true. Is like, we tell the kids all the time, it's you have to move on. As a head coach, I get caught maybe yelling at the official or, yelling in the headset and that kind of stuff. But, it probably comes from my wife, is enjoy being there, enjoy the moment. She said that to me so many times because I was coaching my kids. Enjoy being with them. Like you got something special that a lot of people don't get, and that's coaching their own kids. And I've been able to do that with 4 of them. And then enjoy the ride. Like, winning championships, like you get there and you win it, and then the next day, guess what? It's gone. And so take time to enjoy the moments, the process, the seasons, the games. Like don't try to rush from winning on Friday night to jumping in the film to win the next game. Like give yourself a chance and to enjoy it and have fun with it. And so it's funny, I've been around a lot of great coaches and they give me some stuff, but it was her, that just basically told me like, you need to have fun. You need to enjoy this. Like winning's fun, And so that might be the one of all things that she's given me that's like, yeah, you're right. Because it goes, and I don't know if any of you have been able to coach your kids. It's been fun, but it goes way too fast. And I'm living through that right now. Like I said, my oldest, is in college, and my second oldest he's in college. And so I got to coach those two, and I got two more coming. And not too long ago, my oldest was in third grade at Lewis Central. You miss those times. But the days go fast, and the years, or the years go fast, and the days are long, and all that kind of stuff. Right. So just enjoy the moment.
Okay. Last question. I apologize, guys, because we're about, we about hit the mark, but dumbest football rule. I'm going to say the knee pads.
Yeah. Our kids get in trouble all the time, and and like, obviously I say it's the manufacturer's problem, right? Like, they made them too short, which they have. Like, it's tough. Like, and I get it. I understand it. It's a rule. I think, that and face paint, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, why? I'm not sure that helps you to an advantage. Like, what's the advantage to that? Like, there's no advantage. But I get it. It's a rule. Like, you have to follow the rules. I don't
know, man. Neck roll and face paint.
I was gonna say, if they're gonna outlaw face paint dragging down your face, they better outlaw that neck roll, because I'm looking at that guy right there.
Yeah, No, I wish. Here's the one thing that I wish I was a little bit different. I wish our hash marks were a little bit tighter and they weren't so wide. I wish we followed Texas guidelines a little bit more and allow us to play with a little bit wider field to the boundary.
Good point.
Well, hey, give a shout out to that family, Coach.
Yeah. Obviously, to my wife, Lori. She's the rock. She carries the team. They're in season, and obviously to my kids, Braylon, Landon, and Croy, and Quentin, and then obviously all my assistant coaches. Like, it doesn't happen without them. I can't do any of it without them and their support, and obviously to our administration and our team there and our school that allows us to do what we do and supports us like no other. At Lewis Central. So yeah, absolutely can't do anything without any of those people.
I hope everyone has enjoyed the Coach Show, brought to you on the Coaching Culture and Athletics Radio Broadcast Network.